Hey up everyone, I hope you're all doing well. If you're not doing well, I hope you're showing yourself some grace. I really wasn't sure if I was going to do an episode this week. Last week's episode took the wind out my sails a little bit with the podcast. Story of my dad's incarceration and the karma of it. Something that's permeated through almost all of my creative work since I was a teenager. So to sit and investigate it in that way, to share that grief, just me and this microphone, I think it was more challenging than I expected. It left me feeling a little bit like I don't really know where I stand with the next episode of the podcast. The stories, so much of this podcast is built on that story, and the work that I'm doing in practice and in therapy and throughout my life in large is a result of that story. In the future, I want to open this space up. I want to open it up to guests, to friends, collaborators, teachers, share and listen. It can only really last so long by myself, and I'm really not interested in this becoming a week-by-week diary. I don't want to fall into a habit of mining content from my day-to-day life. I think that's a bit of a slippery slope. If it's fresh and I've not had a chance to process it or work through it, then it could quickly become a bit of a sounding board for me to talk about yesterday or what's happening this week. And although that's important and relevant, I want it to have a bit more depth and scope than like a journal or a diary. So this week we're going to do something different. This is a bit of an introduction to what I'll be uploading afterwards. Last year, while prepping and shooting a feature film, I took on a 7-week course through Sounds True called The Power of Awareness. Completing the course is a prerequisite for applying for their 2-year mindfulness meditation course. It only runs every 2 years, so I figured I'd see how the 7 weeks went, maybe take on some other courses, deepen my practice, and maybe by 2025, give it a go. So I did it. I completed the course. I got a lot out of it. I remember hearing from Jack Cornfield once that if you want to learn, teach. And I've always had an affinity for teaching. I appreciate the depth that it brings to your practice. I appreciate that it puts you in a place of beginner's mind, makes you go back to the drawing board, tackle the early work and build up again. I've taught filmmaking in various capacities to varying age groups, and I've plans to do that in the near future at the NFTS, where I did my master's degree. Today I completed another course through Yoga Renew. It's a school here in New Jersey, and I've been doing it for the last 2 weeks as a sort of night school, I guess. Online classes and Zooms whilst I've been prepping for my next episode. This was a mindfulness certification to teach meditation. I got plans to keep building on this, and in the next year perhaps taking a 100-hour or 200-hour certified course. Now, meditation teaching isn't really something you need a certificate for, of course. My Mahayana Buddhist teacher, Geshe-la didn't have a certificate after spending 20 years in a monastery. Other teachers I've had multiple teachers themselves over many years, but probably no paperwork to really prove anything. For me, taking a certified course is a chance to deepen and strengthen my understanding of my practice outside of my daily routine, outside of the Buddhist community that I'm part of, and set myself up in a place where I can teach and run meditation in a more professional setting as well, and a more insurable place. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and then I'm going to release a bonus podcast this week with a short meditation for you guys to try. Something I get asked a lot by listeners of this podcast is, how do I practice? Where do I begin? Friends and strangers in my life are looking for an entry point, somewhere to start off. As Pema Chodron said, you start where you are. Maybe for you that's today. Maybe you'll take the time to tune into the meditation I'll be uploading shortly. Meditation for me has taken different shapes over the years. I started out actually using Headspace in 2015. That was a really great first introduction while I was finding my feet with yoga and meditation. It's playful, it's approachable, it has fun and inventive ways to keep you on track and keep up with your progress and your engagement. I honestly think if you've never had a practice before and this is all new to you, then this is a great place to start. If going to a class or a gompa or any sort of space like that isn't available to you or is perhaps a bit intimidating, then it's a great way to dip your toes and start to get an understanding of the practice, different methods, and start to feel the benefits. I must have used that app for maybe a year, and it held me really accountable. I started to see the benefits and found myself using their sleep aids and their walking meditations. And they even have this really good SOS function if you're feeling overwhelmed or kind of on the verge of a panic attack. I used that a handful of times over that year, and it genuinely helps you put your feet back on the earth. So I think that's a really great place to start if you're looking for something that's in your pocket and can keep you accountable. By the time I moved to LA in 2016-17, I was delving into Buddhism. I was listening to Jack Cornfield a lot, reading audiobooks, podcasts, and beginning to get a bit of an understanding of some of the entry-level beliefs and practices. It was lofty, and it was also a little bit dry because I didn't have a teacher or a space yet. And I think that, I spoke about this before on the podcast, that need I had to prove myself in a space. I think that stopped me going into spaces like this in the past, and it stopped me going to yoga classes or boxing classes. I had to really find the courage to step out and make myself be seen, because I was always so worried about having to prove myself in one of those spaces. Eventually, I built up the courage to go to a class in Los Angeles by Mary Stengavidge. She's a wonderful teacher who runs her own podcast and classes called Undefended Dharma. I highly recommend listening to her. She's insightful, funny, grounded, has a great and personal understanding of Buddhism. I attended her classes for a while and continued my own practice, reading and delving deeper into meditation. Around 2018, I really got into transcendental meditation for a little while. TM's a great exercise. However, I found that the packaging of it, the language around it, the marketing, it wasn't for me. It was very universal and secular, and it was also very focused on productivity, with a list of celebrity endorsers talking about how they use the practice every day and how it helps them achieve and focus, etc., etc., etc. There's nothing wrong with this if that's what you're looking for, but striving was my problem. Doing was my problem, and I had enough of that in my life. I didn't need or want to be more productive. I wanted less. I wanted to stop wanting. I wanted to learn about my mind and my behavior and the nature of reality, and not just bliss out for 20 minutes so I could get back on the clock with a fresh energy. After COVID, I attended a Gompa in South London called Jamyang. It was a 2-year course, but sadly I was only able to complete just over a year of it due to work. I was unable to attend every Thursday, and so it was no longer fair for me or the class to not give it my full attention. This school was led by Tenzin Geshe Namdak and was definitely the most in-depth and certainly the most traditional practice I've ever been part of. I learnt a lot. I'm really grateful for the teachings and the space, but it was also very scholarly and lofty, and often spending more time making notes, researching and doing written reports every term compared to, say, integrating and living by the practice. It felt a little bit out of reach at times. I wish I could have finished the extra year, but my life was just taking me elsewhere. And I'm glad it did, because this year I've been engaging a lot more locally, spending more of my time at the Brixton Buddhist Centre and even attending 2 retreats with them. It's much more focused on community and spiritual friendship and integration, and thanks to great teachers there like Maitrayana and Pranagosha, I've learnt to integrate my practice to a new level and further my understanding. Which brings us to now. I'm here in this apartment in New Jersey on a Sunday evening, having just completed my 2nd course in teacher training. So if this is something that interests you and you want to find somewhere quiet to sit and listen to the next episode that I'm going to be calling Sit with Ciggy, then tune in. If it doesn't interest you, then I'll be back in about 3 weeks. I'm taking a bit of a break from recording as I won't be in a position to get to the computer and the mic over the next couple weekends. But I'll be back in about 3 weeks with my usual stories and insights about mental health and trying to keep your shit together. So either way, I'll speak to you soon. Peace.